Hello and welcome to the Grade 11 ELA Unit 6 video series. I'm Elisa Ruffin with Leading Educators, and you are in Week 3, Lesson 14. Over the past few days, we have been unpacking the text everyday use. More specifically, we've been analyzing the craft and structure. To reiterate an example we've been using, we've been taking off our reader's lens and putting on our writer's lens to examine some of the choices that the author has made, techniques she's used to advance the plot, portray characters, and overall convey the theme. We're going to continue to do that today as we examine the impact of point of view. Before we jump in though, a few housekeeping items. Always remember to share your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend. Complete the weekly fluency activity using a page from your text, and do at least 20 minutes of additional reading a day from a text of your choice. And also, it's time for us to do our riddle of the day. What 5-letter word becomes shorter when you add 2 letters to it? Take a beat and pause. Short. What 5-letter word becomes shorter when you add 2 letters to it? The word short. So think about it. So short is short, but when you add ER, it's shorter. A little tricky ELA humor / riddle for you on the last day. Hopefully you all figured that out. And we're going to move on to our last lesson. Your resources and materials for today. You need the text everyday use. You need your learning packet. You need the Week 3 Lesson 14 note catcher. A pen or pencil and a smartphone or mobile device is optional as always if you want to access the text digitally. A brief overview of our lesson for today. Our learning target for 14. I can demonstrate the impact of point of view on the narrative of the story. We're going to continue along that vein. You did some work with narration yesterday, but we're going to look at it even further today. In your think/talk section, you're going to continue your conversation with your family member, friend, or caregiver and think about how the text would be different. How would the story read differently if another character was the narrator? What information and insight would the reader gain or lose? How might the tone change if this whole story was written from another character's perspective? A really, really interesting point of view. So what I'd like you to talk about with your family member, friend, or caregiver is, other than mama, who would you want to tell the everyday use story, right? What event from the story in particular do you have in mind that intrigues you as to how another character would have seen it or examined it? I want you to talk about it with them. By now, you should have shared a summary. They should be pretty well versed because you're sharing your learning every day on the topic. So see if there's a particular scene or event in the story where seeing things unfold from another character's point of view would be interesting. And that's going to help set you up for later to already get your brain thinking in that direction. And then you're going to move on to the right section, where you're going to do a short narrative piece that combines the think and talk activity. So I'm going to help set you up a little bit for that. Again, always reminding you of the essential question of the unit. What do stories reveal about the human condition? Always keeping that in the forefront of our thinking. And then our guiding question for the text. What factors lead a person to accept, reject, or feel neutral about his or her heritage? So as you look at narrating in particular and the activities laid out for you today in Lesson 14, I just wanted to talk through and focus on a few things that will help you prepare. Specifically here, what information and insight would the reader gain or lose if the narrator would change? So you're thinking about this, and it's also influencing your conversation with your family member, caregiver, or friend. And so similar to other activities where we've done and we've thought about what we've gained, for example, using dialect and regionalism, what we lose if we didn't use it. Now we're talking about the narrator. If the narrator is no longer who the narrator is, and at this point we know it's mama. If mama's not telling the story and someone else is telling the story, what would we gain? What insight and information would we have that we don't have now because it's written from Mama's perspective? And what do we lose by not having Mama's perspective? So there is a win-loss here, depending on what perspective you choose. And thinking that or keeping that in mind will help you have a better understanding of why the author chose to write the story from a particular point of view. I can use my imagination when I'm answering this question, and I encourage you to do that. But make sure that imagination is grounded in your knowledge of the story at this point. You have had a lot of exposure to it. You have pulled the story apart and looked at it from various angles. You know the characters in and out. You have all sorts of annotations and reflection questions done. So make sure that you think about this insight that the narrator brings to the story and consider how the story would unfold based on the plot that you know, if you would have received the same type of information just from another character's perspective. So keep all of that in mind. You don't want it to be too far-fetched. You want it to be anchored in what you know to be true about the overall trajectory of the plot and the characters that Alice Walker has built out for us. As you move on to the right section, the other thing I really want you to hone in on is that it's going to be a short narrative, 1 to 2 paragraphs. You're going to retell an event from everyday use from the perspective of a character other than Mama. You can choose to describe Dee's visit or an event from the past. Just make sure your narrative is consistent with the characters and setting created by Walker. Again, using your imagination, but not losing sight of the overall integrity of the story. And you're going to write your story in the narrative section of your handout. You can also make sure that you use your response to the think section as a starting point. Think of the think section and the talk section as a brainstorming activity that gets you set up and ready for writing the narrative and just kind of moving on from there. You also want to make sure that you're going to choose a passage that has more than one character so that you actually have another perspective to write from. So if there is multiple characters in a scene, that's actually a really good spot to choose to rewrite your narrative from. So again, you're doing your read, think, talk, write protocol here. You've already done the thinking and the talking, and now it's time for you to write. It is your turn. So take some time to do that. Have those conversations, brainstorm your ideas, and then get to work writing that narrative. I know that you are prepared. If you have any additional questions, you can pause this video and replay as always, and you can email your teacher for additional support with the information that we provide. Finally, you want to make sure that you are sharing your learning with a family member, friend, or caregiver, that you complete the weekly fluency activity from the text and do an additional 20 minutes of reading from a text of your choice. And, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our lessons for this week. Congratulations again on another job well done. We've had a good time together, I hope. You've done a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, and a lot of writing. And so you have earned a little break before we hop into another text next week. I'm looking forward to it, as always, looking forward to my time together with you. Have a good one. You can do this. And congratulations on another week's worth of lessons.